This is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321. In today's video, I'm taking another look at the Pilot 78G. Now this little pen has quickly become one of my favorites, and I have to thank James from JG3 Reviews because it was from watching one of his recent videos that I even learned that the 78G existed. Now, one of the reasons I didn't know about it is because I don't believe this little pen is available from any US retailers, and once I became aware of it, I did a search and was able to find several sellers on eBay selling these, so I was able to pick one up, fortunately. And one of the things that I think draws me to this pen is its proportions are similar to the Custom 74, which is another one of my favorite pens. Now, it's not the same size, but the proportion and the design of it is similar. Now, no one's going to buy a 78G instead of a Custom 74, but if you like that style of pen, this may be a pen that works for you. Now, one of the reasons I was even looking for another Pilot is because I was wanting to try a stainless steel Pilot medium nib, and I didn't want to get another Prera, and I've already got two. I'm huge fans of those pens, but I was wanting to try something different. And I'm not a fan of the Metropolitan. Granted, I've never tried one. I'm just not a fan of the design. So I was happy I was able to get one of these. Now, there are some differences between this pen and my Custom 74. My Custom 74 writes quite a bit wetter than this one. This nib writes pretty dry, but that is actually one of the things I like about it, and I'll talk about why in just a second. This nib writes very smooth on all the papers that I've tried. Now, the first ink that I put in this was Diamine Earl Grey. So I was torture testing this pen because that is an ink that doesn't work in every nib that I've tried. So it wrote pretty well. I tried it on a variety of papers. It wrote pretty smoothly, and it was enjoyable to use. So then I tried, this is Colorverse Pale Blue Dot. And I've had good luck with this ink. I've used it a lot in my Fine Nib Custom 74, which is a nib that tends to be pretty feedbacky, and it works well. Look how dry this nib is. So one of the good things about this ink is that it's not prone to feathering or bleeding through papers, and if it's still a smooth writer, and this nib is so dry, I thought, hey, I'm going to try this on some poor quality paper and see how this works. So I had a field notes notebook handy, and you see how inks are, most inks are prone to bleeding through. Look at that. This pale blue dot in this dry nib hardly even shows through on this field notes paper. So I'm impressed. This would be just a good everyday writer in, you know, on a variety of papers. Now, your ink will play a role in that. I tried this with the Earl Grey, and Earl Grey is prone to feathering and bleeding, and it bled through the papers. So, you know, find a combination of, or find an ink that is not prone to feathering and paired up with this somewhat dry. It's a dry nib, but it's tuned well enough that it's a smooth writer, and it puts down enough ink that it looks good. I'm just a big fan. This would be a good pen to use paired up with a checkbook. Get a nice bulletproof or permanent ink. It's a nice thin pen. One of the things that James mentioned in his video is that it pairs well with a planner or a notebook that has a narrow pen loop, because it's got this rounded end and it's so narrow. It just fits in the pen loop nicely. So I have been very happy with this pen, and paired with this ink, this is a match made in heaven. Now, yesterday I had started having problems with my, my Gin How that I had the Rouge Grenat in, and it was crusting up on the nib, wasn't wanting to write. I switched nibs. I still have a 0.6 stub in it, but I've got number 1 nib and number 2 nib. One of them's a super wet writer. The number 1 nib just pours ink out, and the number 2 nib is a drier writer. So I switched out the number 2 nib for the number 1, and I was able to get it writing. You see, it went through another little dry spell, but then I got it writing again, and I wrote on some other papers. So let's take a look real quick. I haven't written with it today, so I'm curious to see if using a wetter nib with one of these ink that's prone to crusting up will make it usable. Well, that looks good. But I'm still going to have to try this for a few more days, because with the original nib, it's still, you know, I would come up here and write with it a little each day. It took a few days for it to get all crusty on the nib, but it's starting. We'll have to check it again tomorrow. I keep calling this J Urbane, but they've rebranded. It's just Urbane. But it's working okay so far. So this is the second ink that has done this to me. The Colorverse Golden Record did the same thing in my Kaweco Perkeo. It just, you know, I had never had any trouble with my Perkeo, and I put this ink in it, and the cartridge was full of ink, and I just could not get it to write. You know, it would just write like this, and I didn't have a wetter nib to switch out with it. So I'm going to keep testing. I'll give that another day to see if it will continue working. I hope so, because I'm a big fan of this red ink. Let's see. Well, if you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel.